All right. Hi from Ann Arbor. Welcome to our Operations at Ross webinar. We are excited to take a deep dive into this signature Ross opportunity with you today. So we'll start off with some introductions. My name is Meredith Hartman. I'm an Associate Director of Admissions here for the full-time MBA program here at Ross. I am not a University of Michigan grad. I am a graduate of the School of Environment and Sustainability here on campus. And you'll find a lot of us are pretty deeply connected to the university.
Hi, my name is Carrie Seo, and I am the Admissions and Student Experience Manager for the Tauber Institute for Global Operations. I'm very excited to be with you all this evening to represent the Tauber Institute. And I actually am a graduate of University of Michigan. I received my undergraduate degree here, and I'm back. I couldn't stay away for too long.
Most people can't, but we find. All right, we're also joined by some fantastic students. We're going to hear from them throughout the presentation today, but I'd love for them to introduce themselves.
Thank you. So my name is Rachna, and please excuse the whistling sound. There's nothing I can do about it, but yeah, my name is Rachna. I'm an MBA 2. I moved to Michigan from the Bay Area, but my hometown is Orange County, California. I went to school at UC Berkeley, studied public health, and did a minor in global poverty. And before coming to Ross, my pre-MBA career was in consulting for about 8 years. So spent some time at Accenture doing external consulting for healthcare clients and then internal consulting for Stanford Healthcare. My MAP was with Amazon around product strategy, and our project was centered around how does Amazon succeed at selling tires on their website. So that was interesting because it was a new introduction for me to explore the auto category. And then my Tauber project was with Target. We were doing work on inventory accuracy for their stores. So I think we'll get into more about the Tauber project later on, but just a brief intro there. And then outside of schoolwork, I'm involved in the Partners Club. So my fiance is the co-president of the Partners Club. So it's really exciting to meet a lot of partners on campus. I'm also involved in the Design Plus Business Club and the Maize and Brew Club.
Awesome.
Hey everyone, I'm Doug Ashby. I'm from McKinney, Texas, which is just outside of Dallas. Before Ross, I went to Baylor University, undergrad mechanical engineering. I did around 4.5 years as an operations engineer at a petrochemical plant, making all sorts of products. A lot that you may not know about, but some like candle wax and others like what you put in natural gas so you know when you have a leak, which was a very smelly business. You can only say it smells like money a few times before it gets far too old. I'm also in the Tauber Institute. My MAP project was with the Ford Motor Company, looking at algorithmic bias in autonomous driving systems. And a quick synopsis of that is just like the cameras and the visuals. They perceive different objects and different humans differently based on certain characteristics, and it's a disproportional rate. And we were looking at how can Ford assess this issue, determine if there is a big issue, and then how can they prevent this in their current and future products, which is a really interesting look at some of the next generation technologies. Then my Tauber project was also with Ford Motor Company, looking in some advanced manufacturing strategies. So say a 5 or 10 year out at some of their auto factories, looking at in-plant logistics and how to automate some of those practices, which is similar to what you might see in an Amazon or a Target distribution center, but they have some unique challenges. So that was also really cool to get an inside perspective. My extracurriculars, these are all things that I did last year and this year before things got shut down, or at least locked in a little bit. But this is just a slew of activities around Ann Arbor that my wife and I enjoyed. Hiking all over Michigan. There's some really cool places, camping out near Lake Michigan this summer, which was absolutely gorgeous. And then we tried our hands at gardening here in Ann Arbor, and I'd say that was a mix of success and failure.
And who's in your pictures with you?
Oh yeah, that is that's a good, I forgot about the picture. That was actually from, oh my gosh, I'm completely blanking on the name. The dog is my puppy Tucker, and that was at Lake Michigan outside of Saugatuck. We went there in April, and then that was Switzerland, which was, I cannot believe I'm blanking on the name of Amtrak. There we go. I knew it started with the M. That was from MTech last year, so that was a really fun experience too.
Awesome. Love it. All right.
Hey everyone, my name is Jen, also an MBA too. I came to Ross from Chicago. We were in the city, but I grew up in Naperville, just outside of Chicago. For undergrad, I went to Northwestern, where I majored in industrial engineering. And then after undergrad, I worked in management consulting with A.T. Kearney, now called Kearney. I did a lot of strategy and operations work there. And so that's sort of with the IE degree and the management consulting work there, that's sort of what made me pursue ops here at Ross. For my MAP project, I worked with Microsoft on their workplace analytics platform strategy. So we looked at their pricing strategy and partnership strategy for third parties building on their platform. And then my internship this past summer, I was not in Tauber, so I recruited separately for operations. And so I was at Nike in their global operations group, and more specifically in supply and inventory planning. I'm happy to get into more details about that later. And then extracurriculars, I guess these are just two. I feel like I'm so busy that there's definitely not only two things I do, but I really enjoy being a part of the soccer club. And then I am co-president of the Sports Business Association at Ross, among many other random things I find myself getting involved with weekly.
Awesome.
Hi, everyone. This is Marcos. I'm originally from Brazil, from Rio. I spent my undergrad studying engineering, started my career working in the energy industry. So overall, I spent 3 years in management consulting and another 5 years working with operations and technology for two SoftBank ventures in Latin America. My map was with Amazon on the Amazon Fresh team, so the CPG vertical, creating a segmentation and targeting strategy for post-COVID. So pretty much helping Amazon define what they should do after the pandemic is over to retain the customers that had bad experiences during the COVID. And I spent my summer with Anheuser-Busch InBev on the global operations team, pretty much finding inefficiencies in their supply chain and proposing new technologies to address those issues. So the company is very focused on sustainability goals, and I can definitely touch base on that later. In terms of extracurriculars, I'm part of the EVC club, part of the tech club, and also I'm leading one of the leadership programs through the Sanger Institute for Global Operations called the Leadership Experience. And yeah.
Great. Thanks, guys. And as we move through here, if you have questions that you'd like us to answer toward the end, please submit those in the question and answer box. That way they can be upvoted so we can help sort through those. All right. So before we really get going, I want to briefly touch on what differentiates Michigan Ross. So I know that many of you have already done your research, but for those joining us who are just starting on their application journey, I want to lay a few things out for you. So as we move forward, you'll see pretty clearly how these things affect operations here at Ross. Now, first, we are the action-based learning school. So this is opposed to case-based or maybe lecture-based learning. Those things do happen here, but the curriculum is built on rolling up your sleeves, getting your hands dirty, and working with real organizations to help build your resume. You'll see clearly as our students describe their field experiences that they get through the Tauber Institute, really just how many applications this has. We're also differentiated by our close-knit community, and this is critical to student and your success as an alumni. You can see here that we've been ranked #2 in alumni effectiveness by The Economist. And as we go, you'll see the number of companies we partner with and the connections we have across the operations sector is in part for our alumni's passion for continuing that success and that community. And then being located at the University of Michigan, we are a highly interdisciplinary program. Here we've got 97 top ranked graduate programs on campus. So many of our students end up taking classes at other schools to help round out their skill set, from the College of Engineering, of course, to the School of Information for Data and Analytics. You know, that's a huge part of why we're so successful in operations here. And then relatedly, we are known for our breadth of excellence. So we're highly ranked in a number of important business specializations. Actually, in of 10 of them, we are in the top 10, and there's only one other school that can say that. And I want to call out that here you can see operations is number 3. You know, along with supply chain logistics, project management, general management. Coming to Ross means you're going to get a top-notch experience all around. All right, so I will let Carrie take it away and tell us about Tauber.
Thanks, Meredith. So let's start with, when it comes to operations, what exactly are we referring to? At a high level, operations really encompasses all of the components that come together that allow a business to run. As a result, operations and operations management touch on just about every aspect of a business, and it's critical to an organization's success. Operations is chiefly concerned with the management of the systems or processes that create goods and provide services. And more simply put, an operations team is focused in upon getting more done in less time with hopefully less effort and fewer resources, while at the same time increasing quality and achieving positive results. So studying and understanding operations will allow you to better understand how to manage all of the moving parts within an organization, as operations is inclusive of every piece of how a business functions. So that leads me to Tauber. So what exactly is the Tauber Institute? The Tauber Institute is one way in which a student can pursue the study of operations here at Ross. The Tauber program is an overlay to a student's graduate program, which means that it does not add additional time to your degree program, nor does it grant an additional degree. The Tauber Institute is a joint venture between the Ross School of Business and the College of Engineering. Outstanding students from both schools come together to receive specialized leadership training through the Tauber Leadership Advantage program, access to an extensive alumni network, and the real highlight of the program, which is the intensive 14-week multidisciplinary Tauber team project. Tauber Institute's goal is to use each of these program components to empower leaders to solve problems, support a dynamic community, and create a positive impact.
Awesome. Okay, so Carrie mentioned how diverse a field operations really is, and you can see here Ross grads are hired into all sorts of amazing companies through a variety of industries: consulting, tech, retail. And I want to highlight that these outcomes are for our broader Ross graduates. You don't have to participate in Tauber to get a great operations career. And we will discuss the finer points of recruitment a little bit later, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the kind of places that Ross grads are going in operations roles.
All right, so for Tauber specifically, as I mentioned before, Tauber is a very dynamic community, and our students' interests are quite diverse as well. As you can see here, Tauber students do not all stick within the operations supply chain pathway post MBA, but rather end up in a variety of areas. As this chart shows, consulting and general management are becoming very popular among Tauber students. And I think that what this slide really highlights is that the Tauber program and the study of operations can be an excellent foundation for a number of roles post MBA. All right, now I'm going to transition a little bit in order to provide a better understanding of how Tauber fits in as an overlay to the MBA program at Ross. In addition to the core curriculum required of you as an MBA student, Tauber students are required to complete a couple of additional TO, or Technology and Operations courses. And you can see those here highlighted in light blue. There's TO 701, Topics in Global Operations, TO 605, Manufacturing and Supply Operations, and students are also receiving credit for the Tauber Team Project, which you can see listed there as TO 703. Tauber MBAs are also required to complete 5 engineering elective credits to complement their business coursework. I'm going to allow the current Tauber students to elaborate on the Tauber coursework when they jump in just a little bit. In addition to required coursework, Tauber students also participate in the Leadership Advantage program, which consists of about 5 to 6 leadership modules that provide exposure to topics that will help them transition and achieve success during their Tauber team project.
All right, so panelists, can you tell us a little bit about what your favorite classes are as you've gone through some of this curriculum? Rachna, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I'll give a brief update from memory of the classes that I've taken that meet some of these requirements. I'm also doing the data analytics concentration. So some of these classes overlap and I'm able to meet those requirements as well. So TIOS, I think I'm blanking on the names, but it's the Excel class. It's, I think 612 and 613, but I may be wrong with the numbers, but it was 2 Excel classes that just helped me understand what are the different ways that you could use Excel to its fullest capability. The professor is really funny. He just made the whole class really enjoyable. So I took those 2. I just finished taking TO 624, which was sourcing and taught by Professor Damien. A really awesome class. I love Professor Damien. He does a good job focusing on a lot of different cases and how those applications apply to what we would be doing post MBA. And then just finished taking TO 620, which is global supply chain, taught by Professor Ravi Anupindi. Again, a really great class. It's very conceptual and very case heavy. So just a disclaimer there, but he's an awesome professor, very well known in the community, and he does a lot of great work in the field of operations.
Awesome. Marcos, how about you? What are your favorite classes?
I think for me, it was a combination of like different areas. MO was, I think, the first class that I saw how different it was to have a high level, like detailed discussion on the MBA. So you learn a lot about managing teams. The professors that I had was really great, really question and challenge all the arguments. So you needed to read the case and come with a really good foundation of what you wanted to discuss. I'm also pursuing the data analytics concentration. So one class that was really good was the big data one. So you pretty much cover Tableau, SQL, and Python, which are 3 very powerful tools for whoever is trying to go to any more analytical field, not necessarily only operations, but even in tech and consulting. So these 2 were like really good classes that I had so far.
Jen, how about you?
Yeah, I was also in the global supply chain class that Ravi teaches, and I think he's a great professor. I actually took that class because I also took a sustainability and operations class with him previously. So those were some highlights for me. He's like super passionate about the sustainability piece. So he like built up that curriculum for that class specifically. So that was a highlight for me. And then I just took an elective that's actually, it was strategic market planning. But I think the cool thing from the operations lens is like technically it was a marketing class, but you did this whole simulation where you had to make basically your operational decisions to support the market plan. And so I think for people interested in operations, it was sort of a cool class to connect those functions and like really think about like what it's like to work cross-functionally at a company. But those are some highlights for me.
Awesome. And Doug, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to echo a lot of what's been said. I was in that strategic marketing planning course with Jen, and that it really was a cool insight in being able to see it from a different perspective and how operations impacts the overall aspect of a company. And on that thread, I'm in a finance course right now, corporate financial policy, and it's showing how some of your financial policies can really influence your ability to execute your operations and your operational strategy. So that's a really critical lens, I think, especially as we move further up in our career and we have a little bit more widespread influence to be able to see the impact on that lens. As far as the TO one, also TO 624 with Damien, he's excellent and really does get you to think next level on subjects. So not just what's the immediate issue at hand, but what are the impacts 2 and 3 steps removed from that decision and what can it lead to in 5-10 years, which I think is critical for the next generation of ops managers. And then I don't think many people have hit on some of the engineering electives we've done, but I'm in one right now, Advanced Energy Solutions. It's a little bit catered towards the automotive world and some different powertrain type technologies, but it also hits on renewables, solar, nuclear, and it's a really interesting look. It's not too intense as far as the actual engineering aspect, but it's a really nice look at why do we use certain technologies, what are the benefits, and what are the costs of those. So for me, getting a perspective on that and being able just to see like where some of these industries and technologies are going in the future has been really fascinating.
That's awesome. That really demonstrates to me just like the breadth of the applications of this subject. You know, you can really tailor your education to fit whatever your goals are. Is anybody taken or is anybody taking now integrated product development? I don't see everybody. No. So I just want to give a quick shout out for this class. It's a really cool interdisciplinary opportunity. It is 6 credits, so it's a bit of a time commitment, but you are working with folks from the Stamp School of Design with engineering students in this particular class to actually design a technological product and carry it through basically its life cycle. You create a marketing plan for it. And actually I've been on the floor when they've been pitching their prototypes, and they invite members of the public to go around in a room and basically get an idea of what the products are that they're working on. So it's a great way, again, to get that real experience, you know, working on an interdisciplinary team for a long time and then really getting to you know, build that business life cycle. And then I do want to make a quick note here. Everyone takes an operations course as part of the MBA core. So even if you don't want to, you know, take on the commitment of Tauber, you know, you're still going to get a really great operations instruction just from the MBA core that's basically what you dedicate your first year as an MBA in. Okay. So I wanted to touch on maps. So I get a lot of questions about this. With the Tauber schedule, folks seem to think that maybe they won't do map, or the team project, which of course we'll talk about a little bit later, happens instead of map, but that's not the case. Map is for all Ross students. And I want to give just a brief explanation. It's a 7-week full-time consulting engagement that you take on at the very end of your MBA 1 year, and you work for a real organization. You're 100% focused on this project. So you're not taking any other classes. You're dedicated to this. And there's a huge variety of projects to choose from. So it might be a Fortune 100 company, it might be a startup, it could be an NGO in an emerging market, and really the choice is up to you. And folks will take it, and that'll shape their resume, shape their goals. The projects are global. So we've had them on every continent except Antarctica, maybe next year. So that's another way to pursue a career in operations and build your resume that way, outside or alongside Tauber. You can shape that experience then to meet your goals, whether you want to build your resume or you want to experience another part of the world. Hopefully we will get traveling again soon. It's basically another internship opportunity. I'm always interested to hear how you approach this opportunity alongside Tauber. So students, I'd love to hear more about your map experiences. Doug, why don't you kick us off with that?
Yeah, and so just the way the timing works, I know because I interned at Ford, maybe people thought I was trying to double up on Ford, but it just sort of turned out that way. I approached MAP really by trying to see just which projects were most interesting to me without really paying attention to the specified function. And it turns out that most of my top 10 did end up being more operationally focused at some technology type companies. And I was just really fascinated with autonomous driving. So that's why I put my map project as #1, just to be able to see what was going on. How are people thinking about the thorny issues as far as how good is good enough in autonomy? And being able to get an inside look at that was really fascinating. I got to speak with a wide variety of people within Ford, from their design Ford team, working out in the Bay Area, some of their systems engineers working in the Detroit area, as well as technical experts and managers from teams across the world, and working on stuff that's probably 5 or 10 years out from even being announced to the public as far as what level of autonomy or when the public would be able to see it. And getting the experience to interview and learn from those experts, and then being able to distill their process and make actionable recommendations on how to improve it. And being able to learn from my team through the process from the other Ross students was a really awesome aspect about that. And we culminated, normally it would have been an on-site presentation. Due to the virtual format, it was a webinar, which was also really cool because it was over 200 different people, a lot of people from all across different time zones, which Ford's pretty common, but something that we wouldn't have been able to do if we were in Dearborn. So that was a really fun experience.
Awesome. Rachna, how about you? What was your map experience like?
Yeah, so I will say I approached choosing my map project very strategically, knowing that I really wanted to pivot from healthcare into retail. So the first thing I did was I looked at what projects came to Tauber the previous year and made a list of all of the companies that the previous year had projects with. And then when the map list came out, I cross-referenced the Tauber list with the map list to see what were any overlapping companies, if there were any, and how did I want to strategize picking my map project, because I think that happens first in that you rank your map projects and then you kind of go through the Tauber recruiting cycle. So knowing that I wanted to pivot out of healthcare, I knew all of my map projects had to be focused on the retail aspect, and I knew I really wanted Amazon, the name of Amazon on my resume. So my top 3 choices were Amazon. And that allowed me to increase my chances of getting on an Amazon project, which happened to be so. So I got my top choice. It was Amazon Auto, a really great experience in that I got to learn about how Amazon functions as a company. The whole project was centered around Amazon selling tires, but then more so, how does Amazon increase their ship to store rate? So after you buy the tires, Amazon will ship those tires to a nearby installation service provider, and that service provider will install your tires. So they wanted to increase that attach rate per se. So got to work with a few Ross alums, which was really exciting because they know what MAP is all about, and they have expectations that they have expectations from you, and you can kind of just relate to the fact that they were once a Michigan MBA. I was a little bummed reading it to go to Seattle, but it was great having a really great team to work with. First time working with peers who you're co-managing and trying to figure out who's in charge and who gets to make the decision, etc. So a really great learning experience. I'm really grateful for being able to get Amazon and then bounce that up against my target internship for the Tauber project.
You make a good point. So I just want to quickly explain how the MAP project selection works. So you get, as an MBA 1, a huge list of projects, from 90 to over 100 projects any given year, and you rank your top 15. So you look at all of these, and of course, if you want to, achieve a certain goal, if you're maybe a career switcher and you want to build your resume in an area that you don't have work experience in yet, it's a perfect choice. Some people will choose based on they want to work in a different part of the world. They haven't experienced, the market there, and they want to build their network there. So they choose organizations that way. But you're ranking your top 15, and we have an Office of Action-Based Learning that actually takes those preferences, and they create these teams for you, and they create very diverse teams as well. So we don't have a group of all consultants or all finance backgrounds and everything, because you want to have a strong team with a lot of different skills. But the main point is what your preference is. And our Office of Action-Based Learning actually does an analysis, and they determined last year's preference rate was 2.2. So that's the average that people, so basically you're going to get in your top 5, if not your top or your second choice of your MAP project. Marcos, what was your MAP experience like?
Well, I spent my map with Amazon, and similarly to Rachna, I'm trying to pivot to the US market. I've been working with tech, but I wanted to get to know the tech industry here. So I think all my top 7 and 9 were the big tech firms. So last year, I think we had 15 to 17 projects, summing Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. And as someone who is passionate by technology and operations, I think Amazon is the one that it gets closer to this model. It's an ops company fundamentally, in the tech industry. So I also ranked, I think, my top 3 for Amazon, and that ended up getting also my top choice, which was great. My experience with Amazon was awesome, because I think my sponsor was a Rosser from 2016, so he knew a lot about MAP. And at the time, our first week of the project was the second week of lockdown, so pretty much demand has peaked in Amazon. They were still trying to understand how to serve all the customers. Like all the distribution centers were pretty much overload, and they were very concerned about what should we do to retain the customers. So our project ended up having a lot of visibility in the company, and we have like weekly meetings with their senior executives. So overall, I think it was a great experience. I got to know the culture of the company, networked a lot. And one of the things that I would highlight is, I think MAP, besides choosing for location or getting to know a specific company or industry, you should also leverage that to network and kind of prepare for eventually coming back for full time. There's one guy in my project, he had an offer for Amazon in Europe, and he was able to convert to Amazon in the US because of our sponsor. And that's by far not something usually that they would do. So definitely leverage your MAP experience to also network with people that might help you coming back for full time.
Oh, good, good. Finally, Jen, tell us about your experience.
Yeah, it's funny hearing Rachna's approach to selecting the MAP projects is so structured versus mine. I remember reading through being like, oh, that's cool. Wow, that's different. Like, I was like very overwhelmed at first, being like, how can I pick? There's so many. But in the end, I ended up thinking about like these like big tech companies are like that's like what everyone's talking about. And I know that that's not something that like I'm probably going to do after school. And so I thought like that's an experience that I want to have, like working in one of these big tech companies. So Microsoft and Google and Amazon, like all these companies were ones that I ranked at the top of my list, but I ended up getting my first choice at Microsoft also. And I think the really cool thing about that project is that like it's not like they just give you a thought exercise to work on. Like they were very much like, we need you to answer this. Like if you were not working on this, someone on our team is going to be working on this. And they were like, in their timeline, they were like, we're going to be piloting like your recommendations at the end of this year. And so it was cool to like really have them be very like engaged, and like they were invested in our success because it was also like going to impact their work directly within the year. So that was like definitely a highlight for me. And then I think also like we had a group of 6 people. I think 4 of the 6 were international students, all from different places too. And that was like a really cool learning experience for me too. Like we took the time to share sort of like different like cultural aspects of working environments. And that was just like a big highlight for me, was like learning from my teammates and understanding how things work in different parts of the world and stuff too. So big highlights for me. And then at the end, they were happy with our project. So that was obviously a big celebration at the end too, virtually.
Yeah, I love how you talk about the investment that the sponsors, the clients essentially have in your projects. And I want to note too that some 95+% of our MAP teams end up presenting to executive leadership. So, you know, you're going to get in front of decision makers. You're going to do impactful work with this. And so it really is a phenomenal action-based learning opportunity. All right.
All right, so regarding recruiting, so changing gears slightly, but regarding the recruiting timeline specifically for Tauber, I'm going to briefly touch on our timeline that you see here, and then I'd like to hand it over to the students to really dive into their experiences with the Tauber recruiting timeline. So I think that's probably what you're really wanting to hear and what will give you the most information about this process. Tauber students approach the recruiting process slightly differently than non-Tauber students here at Ross due to the internship placement process that the Institute uses. During the fall of a student's first year, students participate in FACT groups, which stands for Functional Accountability Career Teams, which provided our students access to peer coaches who help prepare students for the recruitment process through resume review, peer coaching, and then interview prep. So really kind of helping students really understand how to prepare themselves for full-time recruiting. The beginning of winter term, students sit for corporate presentations. So in pre-COVID times, companies would come into the building and actually present to our students. This year it'll likely be in a remote format, but hopefully next year we'll get back into having companies come to campus and actually present to our students and really kind of present about the companies themselves and about what the projects that the students could potentially be staffed on. Following that, in February, these companies do come back to campus and our students participate in a project interview process. So students typically interview for right around 5 different companies, different projects, and then they are placed on a project in March, and they're placed on a project in a project team. So typically that consists of an engineering student and an MBA student, or perhaps 2 students from one side and then 1 student from the other side, but it's going to be a multidisciplinary team. And then students start their TOBR team project in May, and that generally runs through August. So the full, for a full 14-week project that our students are a part of. So at this time, I would like to turn it back over to the students to talk a bit more about their experience recruiting for their TOBR team project. Marcos, you want to start off?
Yeah, I can definitely do that. So my approach was before, I think we only got to know the companies and projects in December. So from September to December, I now work with a lot of Rossers, trying to understand what kind of positions were available in the companies, kind of mapping what companies I would be willing to work for. So I think there's a big part of doing the due diligence and talking with people to really get a good sense of what the companies are doing and the kind of opportunities you have. I think once you get that, your mindset shifts a little bit to now I have interviews coming and there's some preparation to do. So I think overall from the end of November to February, there's a lot of prep. So you do mocks, you kind of really deep dive on the companies that you're interested in. And some of the resources that I use during this process, of course, the FACT group. So you're going to leverage a lot the help of someone who went through that process 1 year before you. That's really powerful. Peer coaches, which are MBA2, so also did a lot of cases and chat with people to get a sense of how should I better position myself for company X. Also leveraging alumni. This is a very powerful tool. Like if you're interested in Amazon, you just put Amazon and Ross, you're going to probably find hundreds of people. Look for people with a similar profile and now work with them. You're going to get very insightful tips about the process and how you should pretty much position for that. So I think in a nutshell, those were, I think, the main resources and what I did in my prep.
Thanks, Marcos. Rachna, do you want to provide elaborate a little bit more on your experience?
Yeah, sure. So with respect to the FACT group, I was in the consulting TOBR operations FACT group. I forget the exact name of it, but essentially you're a first year TOBR student interested in going to consulting full time after you graduate, but you're part of TOBR, so you can't really recruit for consulting internships. So that was my way of staying on top of all of the things that you need to stay on top of to prepare yourself for consulting recruiting after your first year. So that's where most of my time was spent, September through December. But one of the things I did do, as I mentioned, was I really took a look at the TOBR website to see what projects came onto campus for my previous year's class, because that's going to be very indicative of what projects are going to come back. So for example, Target's been coming back almost every year for the past 4 years, I want to say. Boeing always has a few projects. So just get yourself familiar with what types of projects are going to be coming as part of your selection for the TOBR internship. And then so you can get an idea of which ones you're interested in, what industry you want to focus on, what function you want to focus on, etc. So that I did that prior to our list coming out for our year. And then as soon as that list comes out with all of the projects and project descriptions, I spent a lot of time reading every single project description and getting an understanding of what the scope of the project was, because sometimes the title can be misleading, or if you're not really attracted to the company, you might just kind of dismiss it, but the project itself might be really cool. So just getting yourself familiar with what exactly would you be spending the 14 weeks doing outside of just the project, the short project description. That was really helpful. And then again, as I'd mentioned, I spent 8 years in healthcare, and I really wanted to use my experience at Ross to pivot out of healthcare and shift into retail. So I focused on Target and Amazon as my top 2 company choices. And again, really understood the project description. And then as I was going to the presentations, I printed out each of the project descriptions. So I would take them in to that presentation, just so I could jot down little snippets that the presenters mentioned, which comes really helpful when you have to write like 1,000 thank you notes. So make sure you guys capture little things you can put in your thank you notes, showing them that you listened and you are interested in that project. So I printed them all out. I studied them. I took them into the presentations and ranked Target and Amazon as my top choices.
I love these brilliant details. Folks are taking notes. Doug, how about you?
Yeah, that's a great tip, to make sure you have something good for your cover letters and thank you letters. I did that too, and I always furiously jot down notes just to make sure I have something good to say. And it's really helpful because a lot of times it's a very condensed schedule with a lot of companies. So if you don't take good notes, it all gets kind of jumbled. As far as my personal recruiting journey, I'd say I'd echo a lot of what Marco said, especially in the fall of my MBA 1 year, really leaning into the FACT group resources to try to craft my story, my resume, make it as excellent as I could. I'm a FACT group coach myself now, and a peer coach. I've done a lot of resume reviews, and I always tell people, like, I had 9 iterations of my resume after I got into Ross. So it's something that you think like, oh, I spent all this time, I have a perfect one. And then you get it torn apart and realize how much better it can be. And I think that's really served me well, not just in my Tauber recruiting, but in full-time after that, having that skill set and being able to identify essentially better how to tell my story, make sure I can tie it together coherently for recruiters and why that next role or why their role fits with where I want to go as a career. And that's, to me, a really actionable thing that, especially if you're in Tauber, you can do during the fall, because you have a little bit less pressure on recruiting. You can do the coffee chats, you can go to some corporate presentations in a low pressure, low stakes environment to practice. And I would highly recommend doing that. For me, it also, I looked at companies that I thought I wanted to recruit for full time. And maybe after the corporate presentation, I realized this role or this company, it's not the right fit for me. And that happened for a few that I thought I would have otherwise been really interested in. And that also helps focus you when you get to the full-time recruiting, so you don't stretch yourself too thin. As far as how I narrowed down my Tauber projects, it was probably similar to my map, and I looked for the ones that were really interesting to me. I did lean a lot into auto, so most of mine were in auto because I thought for a while that was an industry that I'd wanted to pivot into. And then I also looked for which one's personal situation would have been easier for me to stay in Ann Arbor for the summer. And with auto, that was going to be really easy. So most of my top projects for Tauber were auto and ones that I could live in Ann Arbor with my wife over the summer. And I ended up getting Ford, which was one of my top choices. So that was, it worked out really well for me. And then I'd say, like, it also, because I'd spent so much time putting in the legwork early, as we shifted through to full-time recruiting, which comes up very quickly as an MBA too, if you're doing on campus, it made me be able to leverage and pull back on those resources that or the muscles that I had strengthened not too long ago. So I could just kind of dust it off and get ready for the next cycle, which comes really quickly after the end of your summer project and spotlight presentation.
That's awesome. And we focus so much on Tauber and how you navigate recruitment when you're in Tauber, you know, amongst all those other opportunities, but you can still get a great operations career and not do Tauber. So Jennifer, I want to hear about your experience in recruitment and what resources that you used to land your internship.
Yeah. I guess I really coming in, I thought I was going to recruit mostly off campus, just based on the opportunities that I wanted to go after. That being said, I had always had my eye on Nike. And so Nike does recruit on campus, specifically for operations. And so coming in, I joined an off campus fact group. And so that was really like, because I was like, what is this whole off campus process? Like I needed some guidance and like learning that piece. And then, so like my journey, I guess, was sort of like two-pronged. So the on-campus stuff typically happens earlier. And so I think like the Nike application drop was early December, late November, something like that. And so early on in my like timeline was very focused on like networking with Nike and learning more about the different parts of their operations organization and stuff like that. And then in parallel, doing the whole off-campus exploration of opportunities. And I mean, I think like the bulk of off-campus recruiting is about networking and like I'm a off-campus fact group leader too this year, and like I always tell them like you can't start networking too early, and so I very much followed that path through the whole fall recruitment also. And I think the benefit of networking early there is like my conversations were truly informational. Like I wasn't like trying to ask for jobs or anything at that time. I was really just trying to learn about the opportunities within those companies. So that's what like my early fall looked like. And then I ended up getting an interview with Nike post like the break and stuff. I think that was in January. And like time feels weird right now. But I ended up interviewing with Nike. They just had like a 1-day to interview process and ended up getting that offer. And that's not to say I continued conversations with some of those I was talking with off campus, but typically those off campus recruitment and like the actual opportunities come up closer to the springtime, unless it's an off-campus role that has a MBA specific internship, which definitely happens. Happy to talk more to that. And so I ended up accepting Nike fairly early there. But if anyone has more questions on off-campus recruiting, like please reach out. Like I said, I'm co-leading a fact group of 14 people doing all like searching for different things. So I think I've got some good tips on off-campus stuff too. So happy to talk to that.
That's great. So we've mentioned Fact Group a couple of times, and our students have talked about it, and Carrie said it's a functional accountability career team. And just to clarify, this is going to be, you know, a linchpin in your recruitment process. So you're meeting with this group regularly every week. You're being led by MBA 2s, and this is another, our career development office actually empowers our MBA 2s to do this. And if you are a peer coach, this is actually a paid position through the career development office. So it's a really great way to help fund your education as well. But you're meeting with this team every single week, and you are getting handheld through the process. You know, Doug talked about all the iterations of his resume. You are perfecting your resume with folks who have just been through the process. You are getting interview practice. You're getting help networking and navigating these different networks. These are folks who have gone through the process and been successful at it just the year before. They know who the folks are. They know who these, you know, what these people want to see. They know what the interview process is like. So you're getting that direct help from somebody who knows exactly how to go through the process. And it is a huge factor in our students' success.
Okay, Great, thanks, Meredith. So here again, I want the focus to be on the students' experiences, but I will provide a quick overview of the Tauber Team project, and then I'll hand it over to the students to hear about their great experiences in their team projects this past summer. The Tauber Team project is the culminating experience of the Tauber students' first year. Students bring all that they have learned through the core curriculum, Tauber curriculum, and the Leadership Advantage program together for a 14-week multidisciplinary team project. Tauber team projects provide students access to senior executive leadership and allow students to make a big impact in a relatively short span of time. So with that short description, like I mentioned, I think that the Tauber team projects will be best understood and explained by the students themselves. So if you, the students would like to jump in now to start describing their Tauber team project experiences. Rachna, do you want to start off this round?
Sure.
Thanks.
So I had a really great summer this past summer. My project was with Target, as I mentioned. It was reduced from 14 to 10 weeks because of COVID, but I was super grateful that they didn't cancel it completely, like a lot of other projects that I was like hearing about. So it was 10 weeks remote, and our entire project was based around increasing inventory load accuracy. So basically, when a truck leaves a distribution center to go to a store, our project was centered around making sure that the inventory that was getting onto the truck was actually the inventory that belonged onto the truck, and the store wasn't over receiving or under receiving some of the products that they were expecting, or things that they didn't expect showed up at the store. So it was all around inventory accuracy. I was paired with another MBA student and one engineer student, and we worked really well together. The engineer student, obviously, this was her first kind of professional experience because she had just graduated from undergrad. But it was kind of cool playing a mentor role, but alongside with being teammates with this person. And overall, our project was very successful. We are still in contact with our manager. We have a text thread going, and he just messaged us the other day saying that our suggestion was piloted and they were able to reach 100% capture rate. So that was really exciting that they're taking it seriously. Again, as Jen had mentioned, these companies are not giving us like a thought project or just kind of something to keep us busy. It's things that they're interested in getting help for, and things that other people would do if we were not here. So actual tangible projects that they are looking to get help on, and really value the work that we do. So overall, successful summer project, and it was my #1 choice. So it worked out. I am super happy for Tauber being able to give that preference.
Great, thanks so much. That's very exciting. Doug, do you want to share next?
Sure. Yeah. So my project, like I've said a few times, it was with Ford Motor Company with their advanced manufacturing group. Similarly, they worked really hard to make sure to keep our project going in a virtual format, and that was, I think, kind of a testament to what the Tauber Institute relationship with Ford means to them, because they were able to. They delayed our start time, but I still got 12 weeks out of the 14, which was really good, especially in the environment we were in back in May. I'm sure people remember. But my project was focused on looking at how do they move or introduce automation to remove the need for sequencing in an automotive factory. And so a quick explanation of what that is all these cars that are coming in, or all these components from their tier 1, tier 2 suppliers that are going into a vehicle being assembled at final assembly. It's thousands of different pieces. And so say for the F-150, they have a new truck rolling off the line every minute, which means every minute you need to have new parts at every workstation, and there are 200 workstations in an assembly line. So you can just imagine the logistical complexities when you're having parts being delivered 24 hours a day to these factories from suppliers across the US, across the Detroit area. And if you have, a red F-150 and you're supposed to have black leather, and the steering wheel comes in with tan leather, that's not going to make the customers happy. And these really small things can have really large impacts as far as how many trucks they can get off the line each day. And if you mess up that sequence, then they might have to shut down the line entirely, which is a huge cost to Ford in terms of lost production, lost revenue. So there's a lot of challenges with our project, and then introducing automation is so they could remove the need for this supplier sequencing. They could resequence within the warehouse without taking up too much space, and inventory on site is a huge challenge. And I'd say the crux of our project, because it was in its, say, the nascent stage of this idea for Ford, was building a simulation model, which my master's engineering student that was on my team, he was a computer whiz, and he put in a lot of hours to build a really incredible 3D simulation model as far as how this process could go. And so building those tools, I'd say, was like what we were really doing. The simulation model saying, these are some of the concepts, these are some of the processes you need to use. Here's the simulation model, running through several simulations to find where their bottlenecks were, and presenting strategies to fix these bottlenecks for them was something they were blown away by, just the thought process and how we were able to structure this idea essentially from scratch, from blue sky space, and then give them feedback as far as, okay, like these things don't work. These are where you need to focus your thoughts as you're taking this project forward in the next 6 months, 12 months, and trying to continuously develop it. And so that was, to me, a really fascinating experience. And then they also did get us on site for one day, which was cool to see their advanced manufacturing center, what they were doing, 3D printing, other types of robotics. And we didn't get to see a Ford factory because of the pandemic, but just seeing some of the future of where technology is going into these factories was really exciting.
So interesting. Thanks, Doug, for sharing. And then Marcos?
Sure. So I spent my summer with Anheuser-Busch InBev. It was a great one. I was working with the global operations team, and inside the global operations is responsible for everything except for the breweries. So they handle grains, cans, glass, packaging, all of that. It's a very complex operation. My project was with the grains team pretty much to increase barley acceptance worldwide. They have roughly 30 to 40 plants of malt across the globe. And one of their sustainability goals is to financially empower the growers. So pretty much whenever the farmer grows barley and gets to ABI and the company does not accept the barley because of quality issues, that puts a burden, the financial burden, on the grower. And a lot of the things could be fixed by having a better efficiency on their supply chain, by placing high-tech equipment in their operations, by finding, for example, more scalable machines to sort for grain. So our job was to select a few plants in the world. We ended up creating financial business case for one plant in Africa, one in the US, and one in Brazil, because they capture different realities of the business. And proposing new technologies, we ended up pretty much finding two technologies that the company was not aware. They're kind of game changers for what they're trying to solve. And as a final piece, we extrapolated our lessons learned, pretty much like looking to similarities between plants, assessing like what kind of lessons learned of the 3 plants that we did that can we take for a plant in Russia or in Mexico, and then using that to calculate the potential savings of the company. So it was a really good experience. We had a lot of fun. Also drank a lot of beer. We had like weekly happy hours. It was really great. And there was a challenge of, we were supposed to be traveling during the project, but then COVID happened. We still had a lot of access to the teams, especially in Africa, Europe, Brazil, and the US. So it was a truly global project.
That's awesome global scope. Thank you for sharing that. And then thank you also for sharing, how some of the projects, how you were able to adapt to these changing circumstances. Everybody's kind of in the same boat. But, programs like this really allow you to still get that experience while you have to do some adaptation. So I want to pause there for a second, and I see some questions here. So let's see if we can pull those up. Carrie, are you able to see the questions that are coming through?
Yes. So, yep.
Here we go. Okay. Great. So we've got a question here for Jennifer. Did you find that the Tauber experience complements the skill of industrial engineers, or are there any things that overlap? So I guess drawing from your own background, how did you go about, crafting your own experience, given that you had that experience in engineering?
Yeah, so I didn't end up pursuing Tauber. And I think that was a piece of the reason. I mean, I had all of that in undergrad, but I think the other thing that Tauber does that I didn't necessarily have in undergrad, and from my perspective, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, is it sounds like you get more of that, like, again, action-based learning and more real life sort of problems, which I don't think that I had as much in undergrad. But what I did, like, I ended up working on a lot of like operations and supply chain projects after my undergrad experience, and so that just sort of like was my personal choice of like the additional skills that I wanted to like focus building out at school. So I ended up not doing Tauber, partially because of that, but I think you can probably, I mean, you guys correct me on like the resources available, but like I am sure that we have our academic advisors and stuff that can help you sort of make that decision on like what classes may or may not overlap for you with your previous undergrad experience.
Mhm. And you don't have to have engineering experience to get a career in operations or to do Tauber. So I want to make that clear. I know that there's a lot of engineering principles that we talked about today, and you do get exposure to that, but you don't have to have that as a background. And I'll point out Rachna does not have that, engineering education, or she didn't from undergrad, but still super successful in the Tauber program. Rachna, how did you decide to do Tauber and navigate everything that Tauber requires? How did you go about that?
Yeah, I will say it is a little difficult not having an engineering background in undergrad, since I primarily focused on public health coursework. But my decision to pursue Tauber was mainly because as an undergrad, I wish I had done some sort of engineering supplement to my work. So it was mostly to fulfill something that I wasn't able to do in undergrad. I wish I did public health and engineering. So now that I had a second chance to pursue a second degree, it was wanting to fulfill that craving for like having some technical skills that I could complement my business degree with. And also just generally in consulting, through my consulting work, I did a lot of ops work. So talking to folks on the ground who are doing the operations work in healthcare settings was what made me interested in operations in the first place. And I found myself doing more and more ops work through my different consulting projects. So when I was researching business schools and found that Ross had a very strong kind of complementary program as part of the business school experience, is what attracted me to Tauber. And then I had multiple conversations with the program director that was here before, Carrie, and just getting a sense of what the Tauber Institute has to offer. Got a chance to speak to a lot of students who, similar to my background, were in healthcare consulting, but were able to shift over to operations. Solidified the fact that it's a great program if you want to be able to switch industry and function and do ops without an engineering background.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, it looks like that is it for the submitted questions. I know we are over our time, so I wanted to just give a few words to wrap us up. It's not too late to apply. That is correct. Our round 2 deadline is coming up on January 4th, so you do have time to finish off your Ross applications.
And then for the Tauber end of things, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Meredith.
Oh no. Go right ahead. Sorry.
No,
I knew it was bound.
For the Tauber end of things, you can certainly apply as a part of the Ross application. You can check the box that you see on the application stating that you are interested in Tauber. If you happen to have already sent your application in, you can also contact Tauber directly. Our website is right there, and you can also apply through our website. So it's not too late to apply, whether or not you've actually submitted your application yet.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, our student panelists. I'll be sending out an email to all registrants with some next steps and some contact information so you can continue your research into operations at Ross and into the Tauber Institute. But thank you so much for spending this time with us this evening. Take care and go blue.